Welcome to TRN Podcast, episode 140. So, you sent over those news reports about the incident at the Bayreuther Frühlingsfest, the one involving the aviator chain carousel. What really strikes me about this, and I'm sure you too, is how something meant to be fun, a festival, can suddenly turn into a situation with injuries. Let's try to piece together what exactly happened based on these initial reports, figure out what we know so far, and maybe what questions are still hanging out there.
Absolutely. It's precisely these kinds of events where everything seems harmless that make you want to understand the background, right? So maybe let's start with the basics. What did the first reports actually say about the where and when?
Okay, so it was definitely the Frühlingsfest in Bayreuth.
Yeah.
And the incident itself happened in the early evening. The first news flashes just mentioned multiple injuries, like you said. But one thing I noticed straight away was the exact numbers seemed to be, shifting around quite a bit in those first few hours. Any idea why that happens?
Yeah, that's actually really common in these dynamic situations. You often get initial estimates, maybe based on the first calls. Then as rescue teams get on site and get a clearer picture, the numbers get more precise. So first it was reported as 6 injured.
Right.
Then it was corrected down to 5. That was 4 minors aged between 10 and 32, surprisingly wide range there, and 1 adult.
Okay.
But then, a bit later, another report came in about someone else with minor injuries, bringing the total back up to 6.
Ah, I see.
It just shows, how you have to take those very first reports with a grain of salt sometimes.
That's true. And I think the most reassuring thing, really, is that according to all these reports, there were no severe injuries and certainly no fatalities. I read that the carousel operator was apparently very relieved about that. You can definitely understand why.
Oh, absolutely. Considering what could have happened with a ride malfunction, that's the most important takeaway, isn't it? The initial injury assessments mentioned, I think, 2 people with light injuries and 3 with moderate injuries.
Before the 6th one was added.
Exactly. Before that 6th person with light injuries was reported later. So it gives us at least a sense that, thankfully, the consequences weren't even worse.
Let's talk about the ride itself, this aviator carousel. It's 21 meters high, which is, pretty tall for that kind of ride.
It is, yeah.
Crucially, it seems no one actually fell from that height, which is just a massive relief in itself.
A huge relief, absolutely. The initial speculation about the cause, it seemed to lean towards the gondolas maybe colliding, either with each other or hitting some fixed part of the structure.
Yeah, like a support post or maybe some kind of railing, that sort of thing.
Exactly. But the initial investigations seem to be pointing in a slightly different direction now. Is that right?
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Reports suggested that towards the very end of the ride cycle, the gondolas were still rotating too fast. You can imagine the rides winding down. And suddenly there's this unexpected speed still happening.
And it seems that extra speed was the core problem. It apparently caused the gondolas to swing out much wider than they should have as they were coming down. And that's when they reportedly struck things like lampposts and advertising signs near the ride.
Ouch. Okay.
So the most likely culprit they're looking at right now seems to be a technical defect. Do you have any sense of what that could specifically mean, a technical defect?
Well, technical defect is pretty broad, isn't it? It could be anything from, say, a control system issue, managing the speed, or maybe a mechanical part failing somewhere.
Yeah.
What I found interesting was that the operator, right after it happened, couldn't pinpoint the cause immediately.
Right.
He mentioned they needed to check if it was some external factor or indeed a technical failure within the ride itself. That suggests the investigation was really just starting.
That makes sense. And that leads us straight into looking at the immediate response. We saw reports mentioning a significant deployment of rescue services in the fire department, quite a few vehicles involved.
Yeah, and they even mentioned 2 rescue helicopters landing nearby in a sports field. That really signals they were treating it very seriously initially.
Understandably so, given the number of potential injuries and the nature of the incident involving a ride at height.
For sure. And they cordoned off the area around the carousel straight away, didn't they? To prevent anyone else getting near and obviously to allow the investigation to begin.
Right, standard procedure. It's also interesting that the festival itself apparently continued, just, away from the immediate incident area. That's always a tough call for organizers, I imagine.
Absolutely. But the main focus now, clearly, is the ongoing investigation to find the exact cause of this accident. They've brought in an expert, a surveyor, apparently. What exactly does an expert like that do in this situation?
Well, a Stammiger, an expert surveyor in this field, typically has specialized knowledge about the mechanics, the safety features, the operation of amusement rides. They'll examine the carousel in detail, run technical checks, try to reconstruct precisely how the accident unfolded.
So really digging into the nuts and bolts.
Exactly. And the police are also appealing for witnesses, which is standard practice, too. They want to gather as many firsthand accounts as possible.
And it was also reported that the criminal police and the public prosecutor's office there in Bayreuth are consulting with an expert from the Bavarian State Trade Agency, the Landesgerbenstalt Bayern, about the next steps. This sounds like a very thorough process.
Yes, and it's important that it is thorough. You need to completely understand the cause to, well, learn from it, and also determine any potential liability or consequences. And current status is pretty clear. The ride remains shut down for now. Indefinitely, really, until its safety can be fully guaranteed again.
Okay, so let's just quickly summarize the key points we've gathered from these initial reports. We had an incident with a chain carousel, the Aviator, at the Bayreuther Frühlingsfest. Current reports indicate 6 people were injured, with varying degrees of severity, none life-threatening, thankfully.
Right.
The preliminary suspected cause is leaning towards a technical defect, but the detailed investigations involving experts are very much ongoing.
Precisely. And it's one of those incidents that really brings it home how quickly a festive, happy atmosphere can change, doesn't it? It definitely raises questions about the importance of, stringent safety regulations and the absolute necessity of thorough investigations when things do go wrong.
It really does. So maybe a final thought for our listeners to consider. Reflecting on this, what further information do you think would be absolutely crucial to fully understand what happened here and, more importantly, how similar incidents might be prevented in the future?